Thank you.
So I will call the meeting to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Those of you in the room and those of you joining us remotely. I'd like to start today, September 11th, and ask you to join me in a moment of quiet reflection, not just for the victims of September 11th, but for all victims of violence, wherever and however that violence is visited upon people. Thank you. Thank you all. Glad to have you with us. I hope that your summer was all that you hoped and more. I appreciate that you are here and raring to go and get started full bore for our second year as the Commission on Juvenile Justice Reform and Emerging in Best Practice. You have all received the minutes of our June 12th meeting, and I know that each of you has carefully reviewed and scrutinized those minutes before this moment. And so I will recognize a motion and a second. The moved and second. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes are approved. Thank you all very much. Let me extend a warm commission welcome to our new commissioners. You will recall that in the first year of our existence, a number of commissioners were required to roll off the commission because of our staggered terms. And so we're happy to welcome 4 new commissioners today, 3 of whom are present. Commissioner April Adams, to my left. Commissioner Adams, if you'd like to say a word, you have the floor. You're not required to.
This is on.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bethany Strong, who is with us remotely. Commissioner Strong, welcome. Commissioner Eunice Humphrey.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Commissioner Maria Navarro.
Hi, everybody. I am the proud superintendent of schools from Charles County. I'm here representing the superintendents from this state.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us, and we look forward to working with each of our new commissioners. We also want to express our sincere appreciation for the outgoing commissioners, Terry Diggs, Ruben Alvarez, Lacey Davis, Rondaline Reed, and of course, Vinnie Schiraldi. I should mention to the new commissioners who have been assigned a work group, but to all of you, as we transition into our second year, I know that you all have enjoyed the work you've been doing on your incumbent work group, but if you have an itch to join a different or another work group, please speak to Suki. You're not handcuffed to any work group, but we would have. I think we'd benefit if there was a little bit of fresh insights into certain work groups. So if you're feeling the itch to move or to join another one, we will not stand in the way. So the first order of business for our agenda today formally is approval of the, in my view, excellent first annual report of the commission. Let me start by just thanking Suki and all the staff at GoCap and all of the work group leaders and members who contributed so significantly to this work product. I think it's an excellent work product. I think the governor and the speaker and the president of the Senate will be very proud of the work we've done, early though it is. I just want to throw it open now for any commentary, questions, discussion regarding the annual report. And I'm going to turn it over to Suki to entertain any questions or to offer any comments that you'd like to make, Suki, before approval.
It has definitely been a pleasure to pull together the work of this commission. As you know, the report covers from a lot of the work from January to we stopped reporting in June, and a lot of that work was formative and foundational. A lot of it was the scope of work for the work groups. So it is a good time for folks who do want to switch over to learn more about those work groups to reach out to me and figure out where those groups are and how you could fit in as well. But I'm very excited about this report and for the work moving forward, because once we stopped reporting on this report, I felt like then we had license to really start thinking about what's next. So I'm excited about this next year and what this will produce. That's all I have to say.
Any questions, comments, further discussion regarding the report? Those of you joining remote, Commissioner Parker, thank you.
Thank you, Judge Davis. I just want to echo you and thank you, Suki, in this report, because this is quite an endeavor to capture all that we say and do in these, work groups. So I thank you very much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I echo that. Yeah. Okay. I would like to entertain a motion that the initial report of the commission be adopted by unanimous acclamation. Do I hear such a motion?
I agree.
Any seconds? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Thank you all very, very much. You should be proud of the work that you've done. And we all, again, can't say it enough. Thank Suki for the just incredible work that she puts in day in and day out, and in particular on this work product. So thank you, Suki. So with that, we'll have some brief work group updates from Suki.
Yeah, and we'll hear from the co-chairs as well. Hopefully everyone online can hear. Can you give me a thumbs up, Bethany, Susan? Are you able to hear? Okay. So just real quick, for the work group updates, in the past few months, especially in August, because the work groups didn't meet, we really took the time to think about some strategic planning for the work group. So what we did was mapped out statutory requirements for the work group. So we identified of the 22 statutory requirements, who was responsible for them. We kind of done that in the few months prior to the report being drafted, but we really put our heads our nose to the grindstone to really figure that out. And then we worked with the co-chairs to design a 2-year plan, essentially, around those statutory requirements, just so we know that we're hitting those all. And so that the co-chairs who have 2 years left on their terms, and everyone here who has terms up till 2027 feels really good about what we're doing here and that we're going to get stuff done. So we confirmed that everyone who's already working on things, all of that is meaningful and statutorily required. We again introduced that timeline through 2027. We decided to be casing around the groups, meaningful outputs, identifying opportunities for integration across work groups and collaborations, and around legislative sessions. And we determined that some work groups will release things periodically, like the public education group by design will release things periodically, as well as a group like the processes group who will write briefs outside of the annual report. So we really as smaller groups to really devise that. So that's where I wanted to leave that, and then I wanted to hand it over to the co-chairs to talk a little bit about what they have going on that they've done these past. Alicia, you're looking at me. You want to go first?
Good evening, everyone. My co-chair, Susan Levitin, is here remotely, so I'll be doing the report out for us. The Processes and System Coordination Work Group has been active and productive since our last full commission meeting. And Susan and I thank the fellow commissioners on the work group for that. We met in July, at which time we continued to examine Maryland's gross noncompliance with the Federal Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act in its practice of detaining children in adult facilities while they await trial in the lengthy adult criminal system. We have reviewed this issue thoroughly. It is well researched. We've looked at this issue through various lenses: public safety, cost and efficiency, rehabilitation, and the harm that's done to children. The work group will do a final review of the brief tomorrow, and the brief will be ready for full commission review in October. We then met in August to move forward. We discussed our strategic plan, like Suki mentioned. We looked ahead to additional work that we must engage in, and we created a clear timeline for the other areas of focus that are statutorily mandated. In the coming months, we will focus on the treatment of girls and the educational programs and services with an eye toward reporting new findings and recommendations in the next annual report. We also look forward to collaborating with the prevention work group on divergent. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Alicia? Thank you very much. Yes.
Oh, well, I can go.
Okay.
Judge Weathersby was not able to be here this evening. I'm Carlotta Woodward, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Fatality Review work group. We have our first session that's going to be scheduled on October 8th. We'll be reviewing cases dedicated, the meeting will be dedicated to reviewing cases. DJS so kindly is going to be preparing those cases in advance so that we can review those. Members of this particular group, if you get a confidentiality agreement, which you will be, please sign that, because what we will be discussing is extremely confidential. And I believe, if I'm correct, it's going to be a closed meeting because of the confidentiality issues with the fatality review. So we're looking forward to our first meeting and doing what is extremely important in reviewing the fatality reviews.
Thank you very much. Any other leader wish to report? Dr. Parker?
Yeah, so I'm with the Youth Rehabilitation work group. And we met in July, and we heard from the Governor's Office of Children to learn about the Enough Act and how that's being implemented across the state. But then also learned that they're setting a new priority area around some juvenile justice. So there may be some new funding opportunities through the Governor's Office of Children related to, I'm getting a head nod from the secretary, so that must be right. Towards juvenile justice. We're very excited to learn about that may be an opportunity for new programming or programming that has been done in the past to find new funding within the Governor's Office for Children. And then, like the other work group, we met in August to review the plan that Suki so beautifully put together and to kind of plan for the upcoming fall and the next 2 years, and what groups we're going to be hearing from to understand. We're trying to lay the map of what rehabilitative services exist in the state and where are they located and what gaps are there.
Great. Thank you for your work.
Donna Christie for the prevention work group. In July, we really started our Maslow-based inquiry, starting with physiological needs, and really concentrating right now on food insecurity and hunger and the impact that that can have on behavioral health, which then can lead to juvenile justice involvement. In July, we heard from the president and CEO of the Maryland Food Bank, Kimmel, who highlighted the scale of food insecurity in Maryland, affecting up to 1/3 of residents, and emphasizing the intersection with housing instability and poverty as well. So we'll be looking at those shortly. And Julie Gross from Maryland Hunger Solutions. And then in August, we did some strategic planning. And then at our September meeting, which was just this week, right? Lost track of time. We were focused on the impact of federal policy changes on food insecurity. We heard from the Department of Human Services, who provided an overview of HR1's projected impact on SNAP eligibility and benefits. Nearly 80,000 Marylanders, including our older youth, ages 14 to 17, and their caregivers will be affected by expanded work requirements and reduced benefit allowances. Eliminating the standard utility allowance will further reduce benefits for thousands of households. There's a little bit of bad news this week.
Okay, so, progression and change work group, I co-chair that with, Nate to be here today. The July meeting, we decided that we would focus on, trying to demystify the criminal justice system for the general public. So the group focused will continue to focus on creating infographics to help the public understand how the system works. And these will be also shared on social media. And we established a few themes. One being just understanding that many cases in dismissal or non-adjudication. And we talked about comparing that to the adult system. You know, if you're an adult, have a charge, go to court, you may come home the same day, next day or whatever it will be. But when that happens with young people, there's this notion that nothing's happening. But there's many factors that may be the case when you see it from a young person after an arrest. And then also we discussed pre-arrest and diversion pathways, and then discussed the importance of showing what happens before arrest. There's a whole ecosystem of schools and communities, teachers, mentors, and resource officers that diverting youth from the legal system. So we want to highlight that and give the community credit. And, people are working hard to support young people. And also we look to shift the narrative of accountability. You know, everyone wants to come and place the most harsh forms of accountability, which is detention or arrest. But you know, how can we lift up restorative practices and some, you know, not punitive to also lift up accountability. So that was the July session. In the August session, we looked and we talked about planning and setting our meeting structure to model other groups on the commission. And that includes bringing in some presenters and just having more structured agendas. And then we also strategize around addressing the survey results from the commission that most people here completed. Just looking at that and using that as a path moving forward. We determined a seasonal sequence for public education outputs. So infographics again, fact sheets, listening sessions, and discussed producing fact sheets and people to ask questions or white papers. You know, just a lot of material to help people understand how the system works. And of course, we also want to include youth and families' voice in, you know, everything that we do. And then the infographics will be informed by, so DJS has a flow chart that talks about how you matriculate through that system. It's very difficult to read and understand it, and not in that business. So we'll use that as other best practices from across the country as it relates to flow charts and infographics to guide with.
Excellent. I just have a quick question. I'm so, like, if anyone knows me, they know I love an infographic. And I laugh because our flow chart of how a youth flows through the juvenile justice system is incredibly complicated and not easy for anyone to digest. So if you don't know, it's totally fine. But when do we get to see the infographics? Or is there a goal in mind?
We don't have a hard date for that, but we will be sure to share drafts. We don't want to complete anything out, definitely without, you know, your process. But hopefully within the next couple months, we'll have something that people will see.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I think it's just such a good opportunity. I mean, first I love hearing everything that everyone had to report out, but such a good opportunity to bring us together and start talking from the same sort of materials and talking about the system in a more cohesive way. So I think it's great.
Thanks.
So at this point in the agenda, I try to put in a slot for what we call general discussion. Really, my effort to make sure that each and every commissioner in each and every meeting has an opportunity to ask a question, to make an observation, and especially for you who are just joining us for the first time. If you have a question now, this would be a good time to ask it, or you can talk to me or any other commissioner or Suki offline. I just want to open it up. If anybody has any lingering questions, something they've been wondering about, procedurally, substantively, or otherwise. Okay, everybody's happy. That's great. So to my right are two people I'm not going to formally introduce, but June Chung, is the new legislative director for GoCap. And so June, I just want to give you a chance to say a few words, introduce yourself. Then I'm going to go to the secretary.
Happy to be here. I started with GoCap as the Director of Policy and Legislation in August, so I've finished about a month or so. Prior to that, I was a Deputy Legislative Officer. Yeah. So I'm familiar with some folks from the age and the legislature. So I was with the Governor's Legislative Office for the last about 2.5 years. And I'm very excited to be here at GoCap now. GoCap's mission and working with you all on these critical issues.
We're very pleased to have you. And Madam Secretary, you always get some airtime. To use however you choose.
Well, it's so great to see you all and be with you all today. You know,
Actually, we have a couple of new members, and I should say that Betsy Tolentino is the still interim, but we don't use that word, Secretary of Juvenile Services, a longtime veteran of the department who left and came back, and we are so delighted to have her back at home.
and today marks, as Kara Amundsen reminded me this morning, my 90-day sort of, I've made it 3 months. And it sort of feels like 3 days, 3 months, 3 years. But it's been wonderful. And coming back into the agency is such a privilege. I'm so honored to be in this position and working with everyone. Just a few things sort of where we've been focusing over this first 90 days. You know, I'm not sure if a lot of you had an opportunity to look at our juvenile justice monitoring report for our residential facilities, but it indicated a lot of challenges. To be clear, the report was not great. It was not good. It was very concerning for a lot of reasons. And in that report were a lot of the same issues that we identified very quickly when we started working together 3 months ago. But a lot of our attention has been directed to try to get back on the right path as it relates to how our facilities are operating, with the sort of core mission right now to ensure that there is safety and security for our young people and for our frontline staff, that our young people are getting what they need within our facilities, and our frontline staff feel equipped to be able to get young people what they need while they're in our facilities. So really sort of the base of some of the challenges that we are seeing in the facilities is that we don't have enough staff. And so we went through an exercise with every unit in the agency to look at all our positions, look at all our vacancies, look where we could redirect resources to our frontline staff in our residential facilities. And that yielded nearly a little over 40 positions that we can send back to the residential facilities. We can't hire these positions overnight. They take time, but we are in more of a better position to create a bench and to start having additional supports to our staff and to our young people in those facilities. Because when we don't have enough staff, it's like sort of lighting a match, throwing a match on an already sort of challenging circumstance or a challenging situation. When we don't have enough staff, our young people aren't getting what they need all the time. And then when our young people aren't getting what they need, then we have more situations. And those situations then yield to more staff maybe getting hurt. And then we have less staff showing up for work. And then we just sort of cycle in this space. And so we need to disrupt that cycle. And where we're starting is ensuring that we have the right number of staff in our facilities. And looking at that very closely, I've had a chance to go to our facilities, talk with our frontline staff, talk with our young people.
And we have a lot of work to do, but we're committed and I think we're moving on the right path. And that's sort of the fun part of getting to this 90-day space is that now it's starting to feel like, okay, we have some things that we're moving forward, sort of more so than just evaluating the current state of affairs. The other place where we're really focusing a lot of attention right now is that front door of the system. Ensuring that our tools that we use to help make our decisions are operating the way we think they should be. Our detention risk assessment tool was recently validated, but we're just checking in with the researchers to make sure that tool is working the way it should to be predictive of whether or not a young person is likely to reoffend or show up for court. And so we're digging into that as we should with all our tools to consistently and look at them and see if they are generating what we want them to generate in the way of safety in the best interest for our kids. We're also looking at our intake decision tool, and that tool helps us make decisions on whether or not to resolve a case, which means we just close it when it comes to our attention, pre-court it, which is sort of DJS-led diversion, or send it to the state's attorneys for prosecution. And that tool's currently going under validation. We hope to have it ready before the end of the year, but to really help us have a little bit more objectivity as to when we should provide families and young people more services, when we should forward that case to the state's attorney, when it is appropriate to just close it. Because some of the numbers of closure are concerning to me. So I want to make sure that we are, again, providing our families and our young people access to the services and supports they need so that hopefully we can disrupt further entry into the system when we meet them at that very first sort of contact. So that's where a lot of our sort of attention has been. And also, I always forget to talk about this, but building partnerships and reaching out with our stakeholders, having some of the tough and uncomfortable conversations, but the necessary conversations so that we can really understand how community, how our stakeholders, how our young people and families are experiencing the system so we can come up with some shared solutions and then share some accountability in implementing those solutions. So a lot of exciting stuff, and I'll leave it there. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I know that for me, and I'm sure for all the commissioners, hearing directly from you, especially at this stage of your movement into the department, is very valuable. So thank you, and we look forward to continue dialogue. Very much, very much. Any questions for the Secretary? She showed up, so she's subject to.
Yeah, my question would be with, in light of the challenges that the facilities are facing, and until, they get staffed up, will there be a focus on community-based programs?
We are always sort of focused on making sure that we have the continuum available across the board to recommend the right level of care for the youth that come to our attention based on their needs and their public safety risks. So yes, we are still looking at building out our community continuum. We actually have some new providers who recently came on board over the past month, some investment in Baltimore particularly, and building out access to more programming. And at the same time, really strengthening our alternative to detention initiatives so that we do have those available when it's appropriate for young people to be served in the community when we can mitigate those public safety risks. So providing some extra coaching and technical assistance to our community detention workers who are out there every day, reaching out to our young people, helping them build skills so we believe you don't see them come back to us, but also leveraging the ERCs that we have available to us, and also looking at, as we build this continuum of community services, and you probably heard me talk about this before, I don't want to wait until a young person's on probation and say, hey, now you can go to this really cool program we have. We can do that early on. So at the alternative to detention stage, at that pre-court stage, the whole continuum needs to be available so that we can just meet the needs and get the kids what they need so they can thrive.
Susan, did you have your? I thought you had for a question.
No, but I was very excited with what was just stated. I think that's great.
Great, thank you.
Just a quick question.
Yes.
Secretary, what's ERC? Maybe I should know what that is.
No, it's me, it's all the letters in the alphabet that explain the juvenile justice system. It's our evening reporting center. So we operate one in Baltimore City as well as Prince George's County. And we routinely will get young people who would have been served in detention, but as an alternative are placed in our evening reporting center. So we bring them up from school, we bring them in, we do activities, education support, some behavioral health interventions, and then we get them fed, and then we drive them home at the end of the evening, like around 9 or so. I think it's just Baltimore City and Prince George. Sarah, is there? Those are the two, yeah.
I just wanted to build on something that the secretary reminded me of, and first to her credit over the course of the last couple of months, helping us unstick together with our team at Department of Community Services. It's stunning to me how oftentimes things sit around for years and language. So for example, she and I were on a very challenging set of calls with our teams to why there's not more formidable crossover use protocols. So we are testing and rapidly prototyping with Baltimore City in particular. And a lot of what we uncovered was just lack of communication, lack of moving with urgency, and we are flipping that around. And so we are actually going to be finalizing in the next 4 weeks a written protocol so that when the courts and have a young person who is in the care and custody of both of our departments, which is a rather small number, but very high acuity youth, complex, sometimes medical, behavioral, mental health cases that her comments reminded me about in terms of the evening reporting center. So we're going to do the cultural adaptation, talking to judges, talking to lawyers, talking to staff at multiple levels of organization to expect a very different and high level of standard of excellence with young people who need lots of support. So that should be rolling out in the next month or so, and we look forward to feedback from if you hear about it in the community. But another example of moving forward with urgency.
Thank you again. Delegate Phillips,
I didn't raise my hand, but this is what happens when you're discussing. But in light of what Secretary Lopez said, I actually have been having this thought. There's crossover with DSS, but there's also crossover with our schools. And it seems to me that we're not, when we have a child that's really in distress, we're not necessarily communicating across those entities that are dealing with the child. I've raised this before. And I know we've got some other issues, confidentiality, et cetera. But I would like to know where we go with that. That's come up with the superintendent in Baltimore County on more than one occasion with me, where they've expressed it. So just throw that out there.
No, I think that would be something really great for this group to get into, because there are a lot of barriers in how we communicate. And some of those for good reason, and some of them are there for the protection of the young person. But there are maybe some ways that we can think about how we collaborate differently so that we can, again, try to disrupt something before it becomes a bigger issue. And also as we, think about when young people are returning back to school and re-engaging in school, and when we get an idea that they're not engaging, really having meaningful and intentional frameworks to get them back in, because we know that is an incredible risk factor for lots of really bad outcomes for community and for the young people. So I think that if we can fold that into maybe a worker, because I just think it's going to take a lot of us from our different, I'm looking at our superintendent over here, to think about how we can do that a little differently.
Good. Great discussion. Thank you very much. Well, we have a break on the agenda, but frankly, I think we're moving at a great pace. So rather than take a formal break, Commissioner Bartlett, to convene the panel, I'm going to invite her and the panelists to take their place. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. I'm sorry.
We can all manage our own breaks.
Transition. Please, if you need to stretch your legs, get a snack.
I mean, all the snacks.
Yes. In some ways it feels like that. It still like it feels like it's
I'm so sorry. You know, mess with this. So.
No, it's rural sort of. Yeah, and it's where I live, so like my parents. But yeah, I've actually tried it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the parent, they get the parent of power. Yeah, they release balls from our, right? Yeah. Absolutely. How many of them are on the board? Oh,
Yep, yep.
I did see that the other day.
How you doing? Yeah.
Right. And I've been.
They posted.
Yeah, I've been asking. So I think there's a lot of. Oh my gosh. But I don't remember. Yes. Yes. I can't remember.
Yes. Before that. Yep. All right. Thank you. Some could be official. Thank you. No, I was born. It's like I couldn't get in. It's like, do something. I don't know. But I was on my way here, so I didn't matter. Oh yeah, you're gonna get.
I'm like, it's one side that I'm missing, but there we go.
Panel. Okay. Yes. You have the. Everybody wants to be. Everybody wants to be equal. We are absolutely delighted to have this distinguished panel moderated by our distinguished commissioner. And I want to assure you, Paula, I was not trying to rail on you. The last thing I would ever want to do. So take it away. We very much look forward to hearing from you all.
Yes, and we are indeed in for a treat. Thank you, Judge Davis, because we're in for a treat because what you all already know and what you're going to learn more about is how much our work groups, the work that we're doing in our work group, everything that everyone on this panel is going to talk about is somehow interconnected with each and everything that we're doing. So I hope you've got some type of note-taking tool available because you're going to want to take notes because you're going to hear their perspective on their individual work that they do, but you're going to also hopefully hear what they recommend for us to do as well. Okay, so I'm going to get started with just quickly letting you know who we've got here. They're going to each introduce themselves. So to my right, well, actually, you're not in the order that I have you, but that's okay. So first we have Catherine Rosenblatt from, she's a deputy chief from the Juvenile Division of Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. We have Kelly Mosher, Assistant State's Attorney from with the Juvenile Division from Frederick County State's Attorney's Office. And we have our very own Commissioner, Carletta Woodward. Woodward. She Juvenile Court Division of Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office. Let's give them a quick welcome. So first of all, I want to thank you all for being here, for taking your time out, because you're super busy. Yeah, you really are. And the work that you do and the influence that you have on our young people, as far adults too, but on our young people, because each of you are in the juvenile division. But the influence that you have is a lot of times people think of the public defender as being influential, and they are by all means. But the prosecutors are influential as well, not just with the deal you make with the public defender, but also getting to know the child and what may be the best placement for them. So we're going to talk about that a little bit with respect to diversion and placement. So let's just go ahead and give each of you a quick, if anybody has anything that you're just burning to talk about before we go right into our core discussion and our questions. No, okay then. All right. So I promise you all, I mean, everybody's had the questions. And I didn't think I would do this, but I think I have a couple questions I'm gonna ask you that are not on the list. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so let's get started. All right, first, why don't you walk us through, I'll start with you, Catherine. If you would walk us through, and we're gonna follow along, these questions for each one. What is that process that when you encounter a young person? Because you know, is it? I saw the flow chart. I just happened to hit on the flow chart, Madam Secretary, in my binder here, and I just wanted to let everybody understand where you all fit in that process.
So I've actually made a flow chart in the past to take to community meetings.
Right.
And we, Baltimore City frequently uses the term gatekeeper, and that's all cases filtered through DJS for us. With the change in law in 22 and then again in 24, what DJS does with different types of cases affects what we get. So there is, and again, sort of vernacular is different, jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So our cases, for the most part, divide into stacks or specials. Specials are what we call emergency detentions. They are when the youth is arrested by, usually it's the Baltimore Police Department. They are brought to Baltimore Juvenile Justice Center, BCJJC. They are, the officer lets CJS know what charges are being brought by DPD. DJS makes an assessment of whether that case will be diverted or whether it will be forwarded to the state's attorney's office. If it is forwarded to the state's attorney's office, our immediate charging unit of 4 attorneys reviews the case and puts together the petition, which is the charging document, and files that with the courts at the court clerks. The stacked cases are cases when the youth has either been arrested but is not on any form. There is no emergency detention review. The youth is not on any type of pretrial supervision. Those cases have to be evaluated by DJS within 15 working days or 3 weeks as to whether they are going to be diverted or forwarded to the state's attorney's office. If they are forwarded to the state's attorney's office, our office then has 30 days to evaluate the case and determine if we are going to charge it or not. On emergency detentions, that evaluation of the case tends to happen within an hour to 4 hours. We do not have a lot of time. It's very fast paced with regard to those, and there's a lot of communication between the officers and their superiors, and occasionally, well, really it's the officers and their superiors and our attorneys.
So you all are looking at the case to determine whether or not the emergency detention, what are you all looking at?
Sure.
Yes.
We look at whether the case comes to us on a stack or as a special, so whether there's pretrial supervision or not. We evaluate the evidence that we are presented with for constitutionality and legality, and we charge accordingly. So we at that point that we receive the case, we have no information about the youth. We just have information about the offense and the case. So we make a charging decision based on that case that's in front of us.
Right. So you look at it now. So that's great. Oh, I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry.
No, okay, that's okay. I didn't know we had questions. We're gonna have time for questions too, by the way. So write it down. Okay. Kelly.
Sure, I think a lot of that is similar. We are obviously a way smaller county out Frederick than they are in Baltimore City. One other thing I know that we also see, in addition to it coming through DJS, which is the majority of what we get, once in a while we do have the very serious crimes for the older children that come to us when detectives call us, just like they would in an adult case, and be like, hey, we got an anonymous tip for child sexual abuse material, something like that, where it's, it's an investigation, something very large, something very big, something very serious, potentially. We've had recently from last year, unfortunately, we had murder that was committed by a juvenile.
So those types of things aren't your typical through DJS to get just those. We are having the detectives reach us directly to sort of tackle those cases. But luckily, in Frederick, that's not, it's pretty rare, but it does happen that way. And one thing I wanted to add in our county, and I don't know if this is like the city or not, we actually have, and obviously the kids aren't charged, we have parents showing up at our door in Frederick and knocking on our door to come talk to us. What am I gonna do with my kid? They're out of control. I don't know what to do. And then that will kind of lead into conversion. And so we literally meet with parents off the street. They come and they just, they're looking for help.
Well, you're hitting on something we're gonna talk about, because I do want to talk about some of the alternatives that exist as well. And also, we were talking about the publication with the publication work group. There's a question I have about publication for you all as well. Okay.
Just briefly, I mean, it's similar to kind of Baltimore City and how we get our cases. So when Kelly talks about parents coming in, we have parents coming in, and it's unfortunate that we have to direct them in different places. I can't initiate charges as a prosecutor, whereas in the adult system, if they came in, we were able to do those type of things, send them to the commissioner. We actually have to say, contact the police, or we have to make sure that they go through the Department of Juvenile Services. We also get cases through appeals when families do not agree with the Department of Juvenile Justice decision. They can appeal that decision to our office for us to be able to review those. And the other way in Montgomery County, we get ours are what we call transfer downs. And that would be when a child is charged as an adult and ultimately it ends up coming back to juvenile court. That's another way that we get those types of cases. We have different lingo too, but ours are 30-day cases, which are emergency cases, and we have our 60-day cases, which are the cases that come in through DJF, and we have 30 days to make a charging decision as to whether we're going to proceed forward on that particular case. So that's how we get our cases in Montgomery County.
All right. So, in determining, can you tell us a little bit, and I guess, Carla, since you just went, can you tell us a little bit what determines on whether or not you're going to proceed with prosecution?
I think for my unit and kind of what I tell my ASAs is we're really looking, first of all, do we have a case, right? Like, are we able to, as prosecutors, we have an ethical obligation that when we are charging a case that we believe that we can win beyond a reasonable doubt. That is our highest ethical burden. And in looking at the cases, we have to make that determination. Can we actually prove this case? That's number one, right? Because if you can't, you're done at that point. And I think the second thing that we kind of look at is what is appropriate for this child. This may be a child that we know, and maybe that child is currently in the system and is doing fantastic. And maybe this is a very minor case, and it's kind of like, do we want to add to it or do we not want to add to it? I think that it is the discretion of a prosecutor and kind of making those determinations. I think we also look at it from a perspective of, do I want to petition? Is it a first offense? Is it appropriate for it to go back to the Department of Juvenile Services for them to receive services there instead of being formally charged in juvenile court? That is an option that we have and that we have the ability to do. I think it's also looking at kind of what is the outcome? What are we looking? What services does this child need? Even aside from what they have, the crime or the delinquent act that they are alleged to have committed, kind of what are we looking for? What services can we get this child and what is appropriate? And I think that that's kind of what we look at. And it is a lot of discretion. It's a lot of really digging deep. That there's a lot of different, it's not just prosecuting a child, it's looking at the totality and that individual child and what that child needs.
Mm-hmm. Now, you all have, a finite period of time that you can, as Catherine, I think, alluded to, you have a finite period of time in which you have to determine whether or not you're going to prosecute. You have a finite period of time if you are going to prosecute. That is ingrained in the entire, in the state statute. So can you all talk about that just a little bit on how that affects some of your caseload and how is it different is it different for children than it is for adults?
I think so. I mean, I specifically when you're talking about the detention cases, right? When we talk about the 30 days that we have to review for just regular cases that are non-detained, we have that 30 days to kind of conference the case, kind of determine where we're going, and then it's filed with the court system. I think when you talk about detention cases, We have 30 days to put that case together. And if they're being detained, it's a significant case. There may be DNA that's involved. It may be a rape. It may be a murder. It may be carjacking. It may be armed robbery. And we're having to put together a case in such a very short period of time. In Montgomery County, we have to file our petition within 10 days of the time of the detention, and we have to try that within 30 days. And that's a lot.
Yep, yep, I agree.
I was gonna say, because think about that in an adult case, if you had an adult rape, an adult carjacking, by the time that defendant gets to court, I mean, and we have to do it in 30 days. So it's a lot of pressure, on everyone, even law enforcement, to try to make sure the right things are done. And I know even in our office, and I'm sure Kate and Carlotta as well, within that 30 days, we always reach out to the victims and try to get their take on it, because their voice is important as well. I mean, just for example, a kid, it was a robbery or whatever, and we reached out, but it was a neighbor that knew the family, and they said to me, they were like, look, Dennis Mosher, I know this family. Like, I just want him to not do this again. Like, and so them talking to me, and then we, like you said, conference group, and I'm like, look, what are we going to do with this kid? Should we set it? Should we just make him, without getting a criminal, we didn't want to charge him because the victim had a big voice in that case. And they were really like, I don't want this to go forward. So, a lot of times the victim's voice is obviously very important in either direction.
You want to add anything on that?
No, I sort of second both statements for sure.
All right. Well, so let's talk about diversion. We kind of all have mentioned it a little bit here. So with respect to diversion, I think I could mention a couple, and you all probably all mentioned a few circumstances where diversion is the better option for the child. Can you talk a little bit about what type of education as well as diversion you may find appropriate? And if you could give us some general examples, it'll be great for those of us who are visual learners.
The Baltimore City SAO does not currently have a diversion program because of the way that the cases are filtered. We handle the cases that are already sort of sent to us because diversion has already been evaluated to not be appropriate. Or sometimes it's diversion has been attempted and it hasn't worked out. Those are what in the city get called failed informers. Those are cases where it has been diverted by DJS for the youth to receive services or engage in services, and that has not worked out. When, however, we do get a case, we speak to the victim, or we are doing our holistic view of the respondent. We're trying to find out more about what is their home life like, what is their background, what brought this case to us. If the ASA believes that a diversion program is more appropriate, and at this point it has already been charged, our ASAs will talk with the Office of Public Defender or the attorney who is representing the youth about that type of resolution. So sometimes that's a very unique Baltimore City thing called a mutual postponement, which is a 6-month postponement for the youth to engage in services. And then if the youth does so, then the case is dismissed at that point. Stats are something that can be used. Similarly, we're trying to sort of distinguish that a little bit more because it gets very muddled in the court system. Sure. A stat is actually a disposition, but it's also a postponement. It's just a sort of much longer postponement of a case. They exist also in the adult system. Mutual postponements are not just a juvenile specific, they are a Baltimore City juvenile specific creation. Which is why as somebody who didn't start practice in Baltimore City, I'm working to get them separated. Both of those things allow the youth to receive services before there's any finding of fact sustained or finding of delinquency that will then inform whether that is necessary in that case.
Is that so? There's services that are required in order to be completed before you're able to get them into a postponement?
No, so, it is a sort of postponement that allows the services to take place over a series of 6 months.
Okay.
And sometimes it can be, and usually those services or those conditions, because we will typically call them conditions, are very case specific. We had great success with one of our ASAs, asking the kids to write it over for them. You know, and it was if I'm remembering correctly, it was a handgun violence case, or not an act of violence, but there was a handgun involved, and there were a number of programs, like the SMART program with University of Maryland Shock Trauma, that the youth went and did and wrote a report about their experience with that. And so it was very customized to what the ASA felt would be most productive for the youth to experience in order to change, essentially in order to break the cycle and change behavior. And so it was an agreement that the ASA, the public defender, and the magistrate all came together on, and sort of said this: if the youth does X, Y, and Z, the case will be dismissed. That postponement occurred in order for the youth to complete those conditions. He did so successfully, and then the case was dismissed with him having completed, and that report was a really lovely way for everyone who was engaged in that case to really see that he had taken accountability and that he had been thinking long and hard about what types of choices he wants to make with his life.
What a creative idea. I really like that. And it doesn't cost anything, right?
No, I mean, I don't run the budget. So I can't.
But I like that idea.
But yes, no, so we do what we can to, we do get a lot of cases. And so we also encourage our ASAs, when there are cases that stand out, when there are youth that stand out as needing or benefiting from sort of non-traditional methods, we're fully supportive of it.
That's great. So, sure. Any diversion and can you also talk about any barriers that you may have to them to being able to recommend?
Yeah, so within our county, Frederick County, we're very fortunate. We do actually have the version through our office. We call it the Jedi program, and that comes directly from, I know, right? So we all have like little Yodas in our office, Yodas. So they come directly from like law enforcement and whatever. There's a coordinator in our office, Ms. Fornhart, that does it. She reviews them, the chief of my division, Mr. Moore. And they come in through law enforcement. They are first time like misdemeanor offenses for these youth that get then sent to the Jedi system. It's a 90-day contract. They agree to do it. It's voluntary, right? And we're like, look, we're not even gonna do anything with your case as long as you want to do this. You can sign a 90-day contract. Same thing. We have different things that we can have them do, whether it's, and a lot of them come through DJS, like the DJS management thing, their baby class with the awareness education program. We have Justice Jobs, which is awesome in Frederick County. They start teaching youth to help them like interviewing skills and do things like that. So we they come up with the things that are creative for that child to do. And if they do it within their 90-day contract, that's it. So like we never petition it, we haven't said it, it's just gone. And we are also super lucky in our county. We have the Youthful Offender Program. I don't know if anybody of you know Mike Folio. He retired back in December. So we just restarted that program. It's been going on for decades. And it's a 3-week intensive program. We have each month we do it, except for December. It's either the girls and the boys are separated, but they go to shock trauma. And that's what I was thinking. They do that. They do community service, firehouse. They go to the jail. They do the jail. They have speakers all week. They do a driving class thing. The state police come and talk to them about driving. They do a sex thing. So each night is a different thing. And it's small groups, like 10 to 12. We provide all the transportation. We pick them up from school. We take them home. It's free. So it can be a condition of probation. But when the parents that come into our office, we're like, hey, let's go meet Mr. Pickens. Maybe your kid can do yacht. And, maybe that'll help them out. So we're very lucky in our county that we have those 2 programs, but I still feel like we need more. I do. I just feel like there's just not enough Which I guess, I don't know if it's money, it's people, it's time, it's everything.
So do you have a goal? So is there a wait list for some of these programs, or if they're not available, then you're not able to recommend diversion, and then something more severe has to happen?
No, so there are plenty of spaces for generals, plenty. But the youthful offender, you have to be able to fit into your class, your month. And they can postpone you, like, oh, we can't get you to October, we'll put you in November. It's the girls' group, it's not till January. But I think that just a lot of times, just certain specific things that we see come through that just isn't enough. Different things to have, like any anti-gang stuff, that they don't have enough of that. I was gonna talk about some of the inpatient drug stuff, we can go for that. So anyway,
Gotcha. So what's happening down in Montgomery County?
So I think what happened in Montgomery, we used to have diversion, which would actually be the picture diversion in Montgomery County. It was like pre-DJS. So we had Teen Court, which was a program for over 20 years. COVID kind of hit, and then the laws changed, and that was a program in which it was lower level offenses, where we would provide mental health and substance abuse assessments, and they would have their peers, and they would have to do community service. It was a wonderful, wonderful program. The problem is we don't have those cases anymore. And so that became an issue. So what I think we've been doing in Montgomery County is really just education and going into the schools. We have a truancy prevention program in Montgomery County, and in the state's attorney's office. We go into schools and talk about Speak Up, Save a Life. We do Choose Respect. We do guns. We went into every high school and did a presentation on guns and the dangers of guns and kind of what we're seeing. We do hate crimes and anti-bullying. So I think what we were trying to do is a lot of education, which is in hopes that we don't even see them coming into the system or having police contact. I think with our diversion, that what we also had with the police, there was the ability to kind of have a substance abuse assessment and a mental health assessment aside from Teen Court that was able to be done. But that was when, marijuana, and you had alcohol citations, and you had your minor shoplifting, and you had your malicious destruction of property and all that. We just don't see those cases anymore. And so without those cases, those diversion programs dwindled. And so really our focus is education.
Okay, well then that leads to my question that I actually had, was whether or not you all had a budget for education, because I remember when Eric was speaking, I can't remember where my notes are on that one, but when he was saying that one of the goals of his subgroup, of his work group, is actually to put together, for the public narratives. So do you all have an education budget where you go out and do any type of community engagement type of, yeah, I'm seeing heads nodding, so yes, okay, great, that's good, because that wasn't on the list, but I just wanted to make sure I got that out there. So let's talk about community and public expectation, okay? So with going out and, doing your community speaking or community engagement, talking with parents, etc., can you all talk to us about that a little bit, and what are you hearing from some of the folks that you're talking to with respect to youth crime and accountability, good, bad, and the other?
I think that juvenile is obviously very confidential, and I think that, there's a lot of things that go on the news that heighten the alert of the community. But what I can say is that there is a frustration level in the community, and it's a frustration level for our victims and for witnesses, the feeling of no accountability. I think it's also, going through the process and understanding how the system works can be very frustrating to them. And what we have seen recently is the kids themselves, they know that. They know that there is going to be, in a lot of circumstances, no accountability and no consequences. And they will tell police officers that on body worn camera. They will say in the courtroom to the judge, there's nothing you can do to me. And the reality is, in some circumstances, that's actually correct. And so that is where I think the frustration comes in from the community and from our victims. And then people just don't want to cooperate. They don't want to come in. They don't want to have anything to do with this because they don't believe that anything is going to happen at the end of the day. And that's what we see a lot of frustration within.
So where is that coming from? Because I'm hearing like, our diversion programs were, some of them were volunteer, are volunteer, right? So if they're volunteer, then what's going on? This is for Kelly, I guess. So what's going on as to they're feeling that you can't do anything to them, and they're communicating that you can't do anything to them. Where is that stemming from?
I think in my world anyway, some of the victims, some of the, in their mind, they're victim of a crime. Their expectation of what should happen to this young person does not match what we can do. A lot of times they can be put on probation, they can be on supervised probation or break. Yeah, like that's what I hear a lot. Like, and what else? I'm like, well, they'll have, the ability to get rehabilitated, they'll have therapy, they'll have this, they'll have that, and they're just like, I don't know,
so the victim response, do you talk to
not always,
but the victim response where victims are not feeling that it is sufficient to have diversion or different programs, that detention is the only thing that would make them feel whole.
For example, I had a 13-year-old that took part in a robbery. The family was in a minivan, 13-year-old, and we had this on the Instagram Snapchat, they get their phones, and they said to this person, the 13-year-old, you take the gun because nothing's going to happen to you. So when they got in this car with his family, he held the gun to the girl's head in the back. And then he was just 13, you know what I mean? So
This was a while ago, right? This is recent?
About a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about a year ago. And that family, the mother, she was just devastated. She's like,
I guess we'll talk about that because I want to find out why.
I think a little bit of it is like, it's not that, I think there's a difference. It's not saying every child needs to be detained. That's not what I'm saying.
No.
But I think the reality is that when a kid is put on probation, and let's say it's for a misdemeanor, and I will give an example. There was a domestic violence issue going on in a case, and what was happening was there was a peace order, and the individual, the respondent, kept violating that peace order, and that is a misdemeanor. And the reality is that he was placed on probation and ultimately kept violating. There was nothing the court under the law could do to rectify that situation because that child could not be removed at that point from the community. And any of the services that were being offered through probation, if we were to do a violation of probation, still could not be removed. They could only say, well, you'll continue on probation. So I think the frustration for the family is what does this really matter? This individual is continuing to commit crimes, is continuing to do this, and there is nothing that can happen. And I think that that's what I mean by frustration. Not that kids should be detained. It is when services are being provided that if they are not participating in those services, there, in some circumstances, there is the inability to back up well, if you don't do this, something is going to happen to you. And that's where I think that there is a frustration that you can see within the community.
I completely agree. We have a lot of parents parents of respondents who are to that level of frustrated. I got to know the mom of a respondent pretty well because she was routinely to our office because she knew her son was not complying with his probation, but he was just not merely on probation. And there was nothing that anybody could do. The DJS worker couldn't do anything. The judge couldn't do anything. And he was before a judge. It wasn't a magistrate. He was before a judge. Judge couldn't do anything. And he continuously ignored curfew, continuously didn't show up to services, didn't engage with anything. And there was simply nothing we could do but have hearings on a almost weekly basis until he turned 16 and reoffended and was charged as an adult. And mother's frustration was not just at her son for thinking, well, I can do whatever I want because there are no one is stopping me, but also that she couldn't control him. She knew she couldn't control him. And now the system that he was in couldn't control him. There was no response from the system, from the agencies that were involved. And it was incredibly frustrating for her. She was one of the most engaged parents we had. She actually, when he continued in the juvenile system, she was sending him out of state because she still wasn't getting enough of a response and support. When he was released from placement, he didn't have the support systems in place from the system, so she was sending him every weekend out of state in order to protect him. And she knew that there was a limited amount of time that she could do that because he didn't particularly like going out of state. So that level of frustration where you have parents who are of respondents who are frustrated because they're not seeing the services implemented. You have victims in cases who are frustrated because they may be victimized a couple times over. And then because of the lack of transparency, which is needed, we are dealing with minors, but because of the lack of transparency and the way the cases travel through the system, nobody seems to be able to tell some of the victims of cases when their case is coming in. Because we don't, and this has been able to be curtailed with the change in 25 days to 15 days, but they wouldn't know. Their car would be stolen. Sometimes they would be carjacked, but the evidence wouldn't, as far as they knew, they were carjacked. But as far as what the evidence could prove, or what charge the evidence could support, and they're just waiting. The police can't tell them anything. We can't tell them anything. They can't go online under, Maryland Judiciary Case Search and see what's happening with their case. So you are dealing with a lot of victimized people. And unfortunately in Baltimore City, we are dealing with victimized people of violent crimes, and they're just waiting. So they don't feel as if they are being heard. They don't feel as if anyone cares about them. And they don't feel safe. So when I go to community meetings, when I go to community meetings, that's who I hear from. And when I explain about how the juvenile justice system proceeds cases through, they understand the words that I'm saying, and they understand the process, but they sort of rightly point out, where am I in that?
Well, if nothing else, you all manage expectations, right? I mean, that can be done, right? Okay, so I just want to make sure that part, no law or no law, the management of expectations continues, yes, right? And so you all are letting them know that you have to do whatever you're going to do within 30 days, right? And you have to decide if you're going to charge or not within 10 days or whatever the days you have. Okay, so that level is happening. As far as specifically what is going on with their particular case or that particular perpetrator, you're not able to give that evidence because of that information because of the confidentiality requirements, right?
No, we can't tell them anything about any criminal background or any, any personal information about the youth.
Right, and that has always been the case since ever since we've ever had juvenile offenders. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that was moving on. Okay, we have a little. Okay, so let's talk about consistency and your discretion, because you all have a great deal of discretion, and we've been talking about it, whether to charge whether not to charge. It's because you're tall. Sorry. Let's talk about your discretion, that you have. Can you let us know specifically, and we've been talking about, it's kind of weaved in between, to what we've been talking about already, but, how do you all, or you specifically, use your discretion in your county? And, it'll be interesting to know a little bit about, is that discretion any different in general for each jurisdiction? What do you think? Is anybody here who's worked in multiple jurisdictions, by the way? Oh, okay, you just said, go ahead, go ahead. Great.
I think I actually, before I became a prosecutor, I was a defense attorney and I represented kids all across the state. So I kind of looked at it from both perspectives. I think as a prosecutor, we are instilled with discretion. We are instilled with the ability to make decisions. And I think, Delegate Bart, what you had said, a word that kind of popped into my head that has been staying here, and that was called creative. And I think one of the things that I am, and I try to teach my ASAs, is being creative, right? Like thinking outside of the box. How are we able, and that's using discretion. How is it that we can fashion something that is going to benefit this particular child, right? Because we are dealing with kids that come into the system who have trauma, who have significant substance use, who have maybe co-committed, which I think you talked about earlier, about the crossover youth, who may be with neglect too. I mean, there's just so many things that I can go through about kind of what we look at with each case. And I think it's being creative. I think it's in discretion is making decisions that is going to benefit that particular kid, as well as looking at the community and the public safety and the victim. So I think it's a little bit different because I think you're looking at each individual child and trying to do what is right in those circumstances that is going to benefit that particular child. And I think, you know, we look at it, and I think sometimes we get frustrated with, and we'll talk about this, is the lack of the services that that particular child may need, and trying to fashion something that is going to benefit that child in the future and benefit that family, because it's not only the child, but you then look at the family, because ultimately it all comes back to one. So I think that, you know, yes, we have discretion in charging. Yes, I have discretion as to whether I proceed forward on a case. Yes, I have discretion as to whether I'm going to divert something or it's going to go back to TJF. But I think there's even more to it. And that's really kind of looking at the totality of the circumstances and really trying to do what is right for that child, so that we hopefully don't see that child again, and that that child doesn't graduate to the adult system. And I think that that's kind of, when I think about discretion, I think about creativity, and I think about kind of what is best in those circumstances.
I would agree. And I think that everybody sort of forgets where we're all from, that, you know, Baltimore City has one set of circumstances. Frederick's a little more rural. We get more and more rural as you go out, or shore. So kids need different things across the state. And when we talk amongst ourselves as prosecutors, you know, we sort of think, oh, it's guns and guns and guns. Well, there's other things happening too, you know, that we also have to take. And when you just talked about that as the family and look at these kids, this is, no, because I like to give examples so you understand, like, instead of talking in like terms and give you real world examples. Just recently, we had a young lady that was pulled over by Maryland State Police going on 15 for driving under the speed limit. She gets pulled over. She's terrified, driving without a license, whatever. And why was she driving at night without a license, going so slow? Because her dad was hammered in the backseat of her car. My heart broke when I read that. I was like, this poor girl. But what do we, okay, so we can't make that get sober, right? So then get creative. What are we doing? But what if she's in this position again? She still needs a license. So that's, I think you had said that, like, you do a long-term, whatever you call that. So we got creative, and I'm like, well, I still want her to be able to drive safely and to get the education to be able to drive safely. Let's just say, like, when you get your license, you're learners, then this was here. You know, but she was dangerous at it, or she was scared, right? And she could have really caused an accident. But at the same time, like, all over the state, there's different levels
crime that our kids are committing that we see, and it's not all like projects and stuff, which is happening. But out more rural, you don't necessarily see as much of that, but they still need to be creative. It's far the west we go to be able to give kids what they need, because there are all kinds of different circumstances. They come from all kinds of families and they don't necessarily have the support with them at home. We can give them services all day long. But if their families aren't backing them and they're not helping them, it's so unfortunate that we do so.
So what level of discretion do you have if you have a child or a youth who is unhoused, right? And so let's say they commit and there's a problem, there's a delinquency in Montgomery County. It happened in Montgomery County. We want to give this child services, but this child isn't housed in Montgomery County. This child isn't housed anywhere consistently. Do you all work across borders in that regard? And can you tell us a little bit about that? Maybe Catherine, since you haven't had a chance to talk on this yet.
Sure. So we have, we have some youth that cross jurisdictional boundaries. And we do try to partner with the other county to see what's going on, what's the history. It's one of the ways that Baltimore City was very late into the MDEC game, but it is nice to have access to it because I will do.
Can you explain what that is?
Sure, yes. Actually, no, I don't know what MDEC stands for. It's Maryland Electronic.
Well, just tell folks what it is.
It's the statewide court system.
Yes.
And Baltimore City was the last jurisdiction to join. So before, all of our cases were siloed. Only city could look sort of at city cases. Since we joined the statewide system, if I find out that a youth that I have has a significant history in Anne Arundel County, I can go on to MDEC and view his history and read what kind of cases, but also what kind of services he may have had. If I have a youth who has picked up, has a history in Frederick or in Montgomery, I can reach out to the state's attorney's office there and say, what's going on? Because also, like, why are they over here? Right? Like, how did you end up over there? What's going on? Sometimes if a Baltimore City youth has a case in Wacomico, that's an indication that maybe things at home aren't going so well, because what are you doing all the way over there? So we definitely in that case, communicate with each other to try and find out, what's your sense of the read, what has worked, what hasn't worked. Do you just want to take them? We will dispose of our case however makes sense. If you, want to, if what you have is working out and this was, and we factor that in a lot with our adult transfer cases. I had a youth from Virginia who was, dealing through some stuff in Virginia, came up for a weekend and decided that it was a good idea to sit around with a gun with some friends of his who turned out to not really be such great friends. And he got caught. And one of the things that we did as discretion was, I think he was the first one that we worked out a probation before judgment, which is very common in the adult system, not so common in the juvenile system, but does exist. This is ordered by statute. And for this youth, the more I got to know about what he was doing before, what happened in his life, and where things took a turn, the more appropriate a probation before judgment appeared, even on a handgun charge, which normally we would, not want to.
So are there any, that leads to this question on whether or not there are any state reporting requirements with respect to state attorneys, or is all the reporting internal, in the sense of you can look across lines, but is there any place that I can go and get a list of the data that you all have?
I'm sorry, Delia, if I may, I apologize. The secretary's got to leave. And you're doing such a wonderful job. Believe me, we are all sitting here. We all have 10 questions. You folks are just phenomenal. You really are. But yeah, she's got to leave. So
Of course. And just like sort of a question, comment a little bit. I really like hearing everything you all had to say. There's so much opportunity for some work together to think about how to problem solve and how to make sure we're getting our kids what they need so they can be successful. One of the things that was coming to mind, especially a little earlier in the conversation, and it sort of made me think a little bit about Eric's work group as well, is start mapping out all those opportunities for diversion, like all those sort of ramps off the highway to formalize court and deeper into the system. And I heard you all mention some, but I think there's still a few that we don't really like flex our muscle on. And I think some of that stuff that the department can partner with you all. And I'd be really interested in sort of exploring that, you know, we have to forward all our felonies and handgun violation cases to you all regardless. But, you know, is there a way to provide additional information? Or when we look at a case at DJS saying, hey, this might be really great for choice, right? Then put it on a face sheet and send it up your way. So when you're reviewing it, that there's, you know, some context. And also, like if it's something we really think a pre-court would be the right thing to send it back to, maybe even like a preliminary plan, but also really some understanding of what those plans look like, what the sort of building a little bit more accountability with the department and credibility of our programs. And also the other pathway I think we haven't sort of flexed on a little bit is that return to intake. That when the case does make its way to court, you know, in addition to a mutual postponement or a STED or, you know, other diversion, that the state's attorney, the public defender, the judge can all say, hey, let's send it back to DJS for pre-court supervision. And if they mess it up, then it has to come back to court, which I think is another sort of valuable pathway and allows us to sort of access more into another continuum of services if there's like not the right things to sort of match the young person up to. And the last comment was sort of just on those cases that I know frustrate you, they frustrate me, frustrate community. They frustrate the young people, I think, sometimes too, where it just doesn't feel like we're hitting it, right? You're not getting it right. Where they are the kids who are falling through the cracks, where, you know, it doesn't feel like anything's working. How do we collaboratively address those cases differently? And I think there's probably some space to do that. I'm not sure what the it is behind it, but it's something I think that, you know, would be right for exploration so that we can think about, you know, through the lens of we don't want to see the 16-year-old, you know, wait till they turn 16 and then pick up an adult charge and, you know, that opportunity feels a little over. You know, what are we missing at that front or in those early stages when that frustration exists? What gaps do we have that aren't being filled that can help address some of those things? So those are just some of the stuff that sit with me. And this is great. And I keep getting the look because I do have to go to the city at 6:30. But this has been such a valuable conversation. And I just want to thank you all. Thank you, Delegate Bartlett, for bringing this to the group. And I think it's probably the first of many conversations we have around a lot of these topics. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's what we were gonna talk about next, actually, was how we can work, how you all can help with anything that the commissioners need to look at, any, you know, data points or any trends that you think that we as the commission should be looking at, as well as any partnership with DJs, any collaboration, law enforcement, judiciary. Let's collaborate. Let's talk about that. I'll start with Kelly.
So do you want to know what we do already or what we should be doing?
What we do already and what we should be doing.
Okay, so quickly for the Frederick County world with DJS, I'm gonna go right down the line. DJS, our people at DJS in Frederick County are very accessible, so we're small county. I mean, I have them all, I can text them, I can call them, they call me after hours, like we talk a lot with our group. We have TOJ meetings, which are transfer jurisdiction meetings with DJS. So before a child has to transfer between adult and juvenile court examiners, we have a meeting with them. So we discuss the cases there. We have our Friday morning meeting calls with Kara, who's now gone, with DJS, with law enforcement. We have a great relationship with our SROs in the schools. And
with the detectives as well, I think the regular patrol and all, you know, they will call us if they have specific questions, but typically we work mostly with the higher level crimes pretty well. We actually are having a training on Monday with our SROs from across the county. Training for them. We have a juvenile task force in Frederick County every month, which is the public defender, our office. It's the clerks, it's the judges, and the magistrates that deal with juvenile cases. And the DSS is on that as well, so everybody gets to plug in and bring up all sorts of topics, anything from scheduling to you name it. So that's once a month. We do those. We have our youth crossover meetings with DSS, our office, and the OPD, and that's once a month as well. We can talk about the kids that have the high needs. So we do a lot of collaboration amongst each other as well. There's always some kind of email chain going on. Has anybody seen this issue? Is anybody have a draft order? You know, what's the creative way to solve the points on a record? I mean, whatever it is. So we all try to keep talking collaboratively. So that's where we are for the county.
That's great.
So,
And do you want to talk about where we recommend, or should we hold that?
where we are.
Okay, let's do the way where we are. Carlotta, if you want to go next.
Just briefly, I mean, I think that we have a great collaboration. I mean, I've always had a great relationship with the Department of Juvenile Services, communicating with them, specifically with intake. And I think the secretary talked about it, and I didn't talk about it. There's so many different nuances that I can't get through it all. So we're talking about reviewable felonies and then sending it over to our office. And that's basically DJS saying, hey, we think this should stay at our level, even though it's a felony. And then they'll explain why. And it gives us a lot of information. And with that information, I'm like, why not? First offense, you know, send it back. And then if they mess up, it's coming back to me anyways, right? So the more information the department gives me about that kid and the family and things of that nature is extremely beneficial. Law enforcement, I mean, I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I get phone calls in the middle of the night dealing with things, specifically with juveniles. They have questions. I teach at the academy, specifically with respect to juvenile. So we have a great collaboration with all of our law enforcement. But with the courts, I think we're very lucky in Montgomery County. We put together, we try to think outside the box. We have a social worker program that was put on, that we have social workers that are in the process of, I think they get their hours in order to actually get their degree. And they're assigned to a kid. So it's a different, so they have a resource, and that social worker is able to help them if they need help with their medical insurance, or the family needs help with getting a job, or how to do a tax form, or whatever the situation may be. So we put a social worker with them on top of they have a DJS probation officer. So that's something we do in Montgomery County. We also have different programs through, it's not a drug court program, but we try to have kids go to view drug court and try to learn this is not what you want to do, and what are the how bad drugs can be and things of that nature. So we kind of do stuff within the court system to try to benefit these kids that is in addition, and try to give them the extra services that they need. So I think that we do have a lot of great collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you want to add anything, Catherine?
I would just maybe try to do that on a case specific or case by case basis. There's when it's clear the youth is really in need, there's a lot of partnership between the public defender and the state's attorney, but also the DJS caseworker who's on that. So there's a lot of communication between the parties trying to figure out how to, unfortunately, it's usually a triage situation, but how to make sure that that youth and that family is getting the support that they need.
Now, is there any type of clearing or qualification that a youth needs to have, the young person needs to have in order to qualify to have a social worker? I mean, is there a needs process that is done?
I think it's through the judge. The judge looks at it, and then maybe I, as a prosecutor, say, "Your Honor, I think this may be something that we need a social work program," or Judge Suespante does it, right? This is something that this child needs. We want to add it, or public defender or private attorney will say, "Hey, I think that this would be extremely beneficial." So we do collaborate in that way and trying to get the right services and extra services if it is needed for that child. But it's ordered obviously by the court. So, but usually most of us are always on board with whatever is being worked on.
And Kelly, I do too. I like-
I was like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Figure that out. I did that in Frederick.
Yeah. So is there, with respect to, we mentioned the juvenile task force, right? So is there any, does everybody just kind of bring their questions or, you know, and we talk about it that way, or how does a child get to be part of the conversation in a juvenile task? Or
So-
the juvenile?
So the juvenile task force that we have, there's an agenda that's put out and anyone can reach out to the judge or the judge's clerk to get something on there. And that's more procedural sort of things and general things. But then when we do our crossover youth meetings, we all get the agenda in advance, which child is on, who's besides the DSS, state attorneys on the case, public defenders on the case, DJS worker. And then that person was to get the agenda. Everybody says, here's where we are now. And then how can we, because then you've got everybody listening and you can say, now, we still can't get her or him to do X or Y or Z. And anybody have any ideas? That answers your question.
Yeah.
And then to be kind of jump in on those meetings to kind of help us out when we're kind of struggling with the kids to figure out what are we missing. Yeah.
Time is running short.
Yeah, I've got it right here in front of me. Okay, so I'm getting ready to get to, audience questions. Let's do that. And then we're gonna do some looking ahead. Okay? So does anybody have a question? Well, John, I'll let you go first.
I'll be brief and I hope we all can be brief. You know, one of the things I think we know from research and just experience, common sense, a kid with another kid is a lot more trouble. Kids really only get in trouble. This is a generalization when they're with their peers. So my question is, in your work, what, if anything, systemically or institutionally, or how do you separate the kid who says and believes they can't do nothing with me to his peer who maybe hasn't gotten there yet, who actually is concerned about participating in an armed robbery and could be, it could be separated from that one. I don't know if my question is making sense to you, but basically, the studies show that the likelihood of offending when you're by yourself goes down dramatically as opposed to when you're with 2 or 3 other people, no matter who they are. Just, if that's a prosecutorial
It is.
feature.
It is, but it comes out the more you get to know the kid. It comes out in that holistic search and that holistic work you do on your case. It also comes out by, and I don't want you to think this is too little too late. It comes out by the kid in any court. You watch how engaged they are. You watch if they're watching the judge. You watch how they might talk to their attorney. The more a youth talks to their attorney, the more the attorney can tell me about what's going on. You can see it on body worn camera and officers see it. And officers will let us know, quite frankly. And that comes in a great deal in discretion. We had a kid, I had a case where the kid was driving like an absolute maniac in a stolen car. Going, however, 60 miles an hour down the wrong way at 2 o'clock in the morning, no lights on, Foxtrot is over him, right? And he gets in the back. So you're ready to go on like, this kid is really a threat to public safety. He's in the back of the patrol car going to, and then he bails out. He's running, right? So he hurts his ankle. The patrol car is taking him to Hopkins and he's sobbing. He is so upset that the officer actually pulls the car over to check on him because he's worried that the kid's having like trouble breathing. He's crying so hard. And I said, this is not a kid who, chooses to do this. His history backs that up. And so, then you're calling to his attorney and saying, okay, did you watch the tape? What's going on? What happened? Why this change? It doesn't look like it's been there before. What does he need? And how do we do it? So, because his main thing is, I've ruined my life. I've ruined my life. I've ruined my life. So they usually, at least in my experience, they'll tell you. They stand out when they're not the instigator.
And then there's ways that we also keep them apart too. I mean, that's just like procedural, which
Their family.
yeah.
I mean, that's where I think there's some difficulty. I mean, I think we do no contacts and things, I mean, we do all of that stuff, we absolutely try, and I get what you're saying, once you get together, it's like, any type of thought process of, well, maybe I shouldn't do that, just went out the window, because the other 5 people are doing, but I think we're also seeing is older, whether older kids or adults, that are preying on these younger kids, and I'm not saying in all cases, but they also know what would happen to me as an adult is not going to happen to you, and therefore you go do this. And I think that that's something, obviously, that we deal with.
And those adults are being prosecuted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Liz?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was going to ask about. First of all, thank you. It's been fascinating listening to you all. I'm more from the mental health perspective, these service bureaus. So hearing more of the legal piece of it is fascinating. But when you were mentioning like the 13-year-old with the gun, and that just like we used to see what we now call victims of human trafficking, they used to be seen as criminals and would get arrested and get prosecuted for prostitution at very young ages. So I understand the frustration that this child had a gun and did something violent and traumatized someone. But that child, like you're saying, was also a victim of the older people around them. And so then how, and maybe that's public education, like how do we start to educate that many of these kids are also victims and being put in situations.
They get preyed upon because if they have a very weak family support system,
Right.
or people in their lives that are
These are the-
supporting them, they're like, I want to fit in. I want to join these older kids, and I'm going to be cool, and I'm not afraid, and I will.
Right. And they used to be the ones sitting out selling the drugs for them, so that the drug dealers didn't get arrested, the older ones didn't get arrested. So it's like, how are we going to start to understand which ones are being victimized, right? And how do we, just like we now call it human trafficking, I don't know what the language will be for those young people, but to me, it reminds me similar of they're being put in situations that they're not ready for, they don't know how to resist it, and so they're going along because.
And that's where you hope that you're getting the right types of steps. We read the reports and make sure that therapy that you are proceeding probation is specified to address not just like, go talk.
Right.
Like what kind of therapy?
The trauma-informed therapy and the education, and making sure that they have the support of how to decide what's healthy and what's not.
So then when their probation agent through DJS is helping them with that, like they're getting specific therapy that the court is ordering based on reports. Right. Bill gets up.
Yeah, there's a topic that's just been burning with me for the last couple of years, and it really has to do, kind of, Catherine, with the scenario that you gave, and the young person just wouldn't respond to anything. In our system, we have SIN, we have children that need supervision, right? So that's a little bit of a different approach, as I understand it. Are we using that as a tool? And in that scenario, maybe it would not have worked. I don't know, but it does give the system a different way of addressing a child. Can you talk to me about that? And can each of you talk to me about your use? I raised this issue. I raised this issue not last year, year before last, because I looked at which jurisdictions were using it and which jurisdictions were not.
Can I be frank with you?
Yes, please.
SINS does not work.
Okay.
SINS is voluntary. SINS goes to the Department.
Is SINS really voluntary? If I can.
Yes, it is. 100% it's voluntary. And it goes to the Department of Juvenile Services, and then they offer to the family. And the family either says yes or no, and then if they don't, they don't. even if it is forwarded to court, which is, I think, where you're thinking, there is nothing the court system can do if somebody says no. Because it is a civil action. And so there cannot be a detention, or if you don't do this, there's no teeth to it. And I'll give you an example just so that you know, we unfortunately had a situation in Montgomery County where we had a 12-year-old who was causing havoc across Montgomery County and Prince George's County. And I think that we may have had up 45 separate different incidents for that particular hit. 12 could not be charged with any of those offenses because they were under the age of 13 and the certain offenses they were committing. They did a citizens petition for all of that stuff. It was forwarded to court, and then it was dismissed because that child does not reside in the state of Maryland, resides in DC, and that you can't provide services.
I'm familiar with that. Okay, I'm familiar with that.
So I think that when you think about things, and I understand the thought process behind it, I have been doing this for a very, very, very long time. And I will tell you that I think in Montgomery County, maybe there was 1 in 20 years. Because there's no teeth to it, and because it's voluntary, and because the court system has an inability to force or have any type of consequence if they don't follow through with what they're being given.
Okay, so we've got 4 minutes left. So, I'm gonna say, so let's, as quickly as possible.
We have not had very much success. I mean, first of all, also state's attorneys are not involved in citizens petitions. But we partner with our police department well enough, and they've filed over 30 petitions, and not a single one has made it before judge, and that's since August of 2024. And unfortunately, on that list include 3 different handgun violations. It is, our judges are frustrated. Our judges have directed people who appear in front of them to go file citizens petitions, but then they never see the case. So there is, for whatever reason, and there is a difference in how DJS operates in every jurisdiction. There are differences. We have not, and I'm saying we, but again, state's attorneys don't have any role in sins. There hasn't been a single sins petition that has made it to a judge, even when judges are directing. I want to see them. And sometimes we have judges who, and judges and police who our hands are tied because they can't do anything to help a kid because they're under the age where the state can get, through the state's attorney's office can get involved. And the victims keep being victimized, but there is no way to get at the youth. So there's no way to address the problem because the kid is clearly in need, and we don't have any way when they're not getting to where they need to be. They're not getting in front of a judge.
Okay. Kelly, and then we're gonna, do you want to add anything? Or
It's very rare. We've had 2 citizens petitions actually go to court for the first time, and it's even before I worked with Laura, she's like 20 years. And then when we sit back, because we can't participate, it's technically civil, but they put them on our dockets. So in our situation, you've got the PD representing this young person, and then the DJS worker by themselves, like with the court. You know, so it was such an awkward thing, even the courtroom. The dynamic was uneven, and ended up that there were delinquency cases that filed for those 2 kids, so that the sentence petition was dismissed. So it's unusual, but I think Laura said she's like in all the years, she's now retired, but she worked as the first 2 that made it to the judge about 20 years.
Okay, we're gonna we're gonna do our lightning round. Yes, we are. You can say something in your lightning round if you want. Okay, so in 1 sentence, what do you believe is the prosecutor's most important responsibility when it comes to youth for the justice system? Go.
Oh, okay, so sorry.
Okay.
The 3 pillars of the juvenile justice system are public safety, accountability, and rehabilitation. And
I'm sorry, the second part, what can the commission do to help?
Yes. As an ASA, our job is to address all 3 in every single case that we prosecute. But when the youth are not considered individually for their needs and for the best long-term interests, then the system becomes a revolving door until the juveniles get 18.
So what can the commission do to help?
address, quite frankly, the individual need. I mean, it's gonna be services.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, Kelly, important responsibility, working commissioners do to help.
So you're just very similar, but longer. I said, focusing on the child that's charged or in the system or about to be in the system to aid and help rehabilitate, to make sure that that child is not re-offending as an adult. And my fulfill the duty for us to help us out. Commission continue to fund more diversion program.
Okay. Okay. Carlotta, important responsibility of prosecutor and commissioner's job to help.
It's very funny, but similar to Kate's, it is, we are an advocate. The system is about rehabilitation. It is about consequences, accountability, and keeping the public safe. And I think that one of the things that is important about prosecutors is to advocate, to educate. And I think one of the big things is she talks about services. We need to have more services that are available at an appropriate time, services that are lengthy enough for these children that they are going to get what is needed for them specifically, not just giving an overarching, you need therapy, check a box, and turning them out, because you are doing an absolute disservice to these children.
All right, let's thank wonderful. And it's 6:01, Judge Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Brett. Thank you all so much. This was just absolutely fantastic. I think we have just two or three quick housekeeping matters. So keep.
Thank you so much.
This is great.
Annual report, going to the governor, general assembly, we'll make our deadlines. We'll be here our 4 nights, same place, same time. Email me about what group changes you heard what everyone's doing in the work group. If I want something's not interesting to you and you're like, I want to do that too, let me know. I believe that is all. Guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Yes.
So we are adjourned? All right. So, you did an awesome job, a lot of information.